Earlier on in the year, Kenya joined other countries in dealing with COVID-19. As you all know, things have never been the same again. But what will it take to get back on track? Will we ever recover from COVID-19? That's why we want to have this particular conversation. I have two amazing gentlemen right here with me to discuss on how you as an individual, either entrepreneur, whether if you're in employment, you can pick up post-COVID and how you can align yourself. So I have with me Steven. Thank you so much for coming, and SK Blues. So gentlemen, is there a silver lining post-COVID-19 for businesses, for people in employment? How can we just pick up? And I know a while back, President gave a long speech on how he intends the economy to recover, but people still see no hope in all this. How can we just pick up from COVID-19 and jumpstart the economy?
Yeah, so before probably the silver lining, so that we appreciate the contrast. The question probably to me would be, is there a dynamic that we are facing? Are these times strange? And I can say yes. Yeah, the ground feels different. The ground has shifted. The ground has, for the sake of our kids who will see this 20 years later, we are in a time where a pandemic brought us to our knees in terms of a global economy. Yeah. And a lot of unemployment checked, like just as an example, from this day of recording, right now the US is at almost 42 million jobs lost. Kenya, we are past 1.7 million.
They were estimating it to 4 million the other day.
Yeah, 4 million is a lot. Yeah, is a lot. And when you look at it from that point of view, then we bring ourselves to a principle that says, never waste a good crisis. It carries the best opportunities. So for me, yes, I believe there is opportunity in this crisis.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you're going to be looking at that in a few, but also with this crisis, we've seen people have been left jobless. If you're in business, there are few that have survived, but there are few that have had to close shop. And as we were having a conversation earlier on, you're alluding to the fact that for some business, they might never recover at all. So what was going through your mind as you said that statement? Because to me, it's quite deep.
What was going through my mind is the fact that I don't like looking at a job as something that anyone should be so reliant on. There is no future in a job. The future is in the holder of the job. And what I was really saying is that every individual now, because of what the whole world is going through, needs to start looking at himself or herself as an institution. And therefore you work on yourself so that you can have a bargaining chip with whoever is giving you a job or a business. It is all about you. What value do you bring to the table? And if the value you bring to the table right now has led to you being rendered jobless, then it is time to ask yourself this question. What can you do to make sure that you raise your level, that you raise your value, that you become an asset, that anyone dealing with you will deal with you on the basis of that asset that you've become? Let me just say something that has become cliche. Everyone is a president and a CEO of his or her life. You're a president and a CEO of Me Incorporated. And therefore you need to begin asking yourself, what really does Me Incorporated entail? What is in it? So now that we are at home, now that we have this lockdown, it is time to start doing serious self-discovery. What gifts do you have that nobody can fire you from? Because everybody was born loaded. That you are trained for a job, but you are not born for a job. You are born for work. And work is derived from exercising the power of your gift or gifts, which are God-given. Nobody can fire you from that. So it is time.
But how can you know? Because I've also experienced a few people in that you are very talented, you're an asset, but you don't really know that you are an asset. And the most unfortunate bit is probably your employer knows this and they keep on taking advantage, or you're afraid of, going to the table as an institution. How do you maneuver through that?
I think every generation has a crisis of identity. And crisis of identity is very interesting because it's a challenge that an individual carries, but it's the responsibility of that individual to decode their identity. It would be unfair for an employer to have to find your purpose. So there's an element of taking the responsibility of aligning identity. Think of it that we are Africans and we are coming from a predisposed identity where we have come from a place where we were loaded over, and all our great-grandfathers and our grandfathers speak about is how oppressed they were. And therefore that almost predisposes us to a place of almost feeling that there has to be someone above us to instruct us from a point of obligating us. Yeah. So it's borrowed. It's coming from a place. And unless we realign it from an individual point of view, then it haunts you for the rest of your life. Then at some point you will be your job. At some point you'll be your possession. At some point you'll be your friends, your network. You are who you know. But you see, all these things are twisted. And I'm looking at it from this point of view. So Jesus comes in and he's tempted 40 days and 40 nights. And he says, turn this stone into bread. I see it as though it's a journey of crisis, identity crisis. You are what you do. It's an occupational crisis. If he turned it into bread, we would be saying, oh, Jesus, the guy who turns a stone into bread. That would be his occupation. Then he comes into the next one, which says, throw yourself. Let them know who you know, so that the angels come through and hold you. It's a popularity identity. Let us know who you know. And people do that a lot. People go to that extent of saying, throwing some names in a conversation, conveniently, even if the names have nothing to do with the conversation. Then the last one, he says, all these things I'll give to you. It's a crisis as well, which is a possessional identity. So when you come to see those things, then zeroes them down to an individual who's just turned 20 and now is walking into their first job. We have a lot that we haven't discipled that child. And that child will struggle with it for the rest of their life. Yeah.
Just to add on to it and reinforce it, there's a guy called Jim Rohn, the late, who said that your life will not become better by chance. You asked, how does somebody identify that this is my goal, this is my gift, and so that the employer stops taking advantage? He said it very well. That's what I'm saying. I want to reinforce that it is your individual responsibility. So Jim Rohn said, your life will not become better by chance. It will become better by change. And change is brought about by being sick and tired of being sick and tired. In other words, you get to a level of discomfort where you say, enough is enough. And until you do that, until you get to that point, then nothing will change. And if you're not willing to change, then you're not willing to grow. And you know what happens? If you're not growing, then you're dying. So if you confine yourself to a point where you don't embrace change, where you don't want to feel uncomfortable, where you don't allow the discomfort to propel you to another level, then you're killing yourself and you cannot be helped. You've got to be your own rescue. You've got to have your own rescue team within you. You feel uncomfortable, you desire to change, only then will you start the process.
And about growth, I saw something that was very interesting in that we've had a lot of time the last couple of months. Most of the people were at home. So somebody was just challenging us, you have a lot of time, excuse me, but what are you doing with it? And the resolution was for people to make sure at the end of this season, you come out with an extra skill. You also enhance and build yourself. So it's not just a matter of staying home at Netflix and chill mentality. It's about, okay, you look at your work setup and ask yourself, I've excelled in this dynamic. I've been struggling in this area. What can I do to improve on this other area? So that also you find at the end of it all, you are working on your journey on still becoming an asset, because you'll have multiple skills. And the good thing is nowadays we have, people call it University of YouTube. Everything is online at your disposal. Yeah.
So true. I actually look at it and I'm thinking that TD Jakes was speaking somewhere, and he mentioned something. He said, I don't know whether this COVID thing is from God or it's from the devil. I don't know whether it matters, but all I know is that this thing has exposed how unprepared we were to dealing with life itself, which is very interesting. And I think as people are now pushed back to their houses, then you realize we never got prepared for such a time.
Yeah, just to cut you short, if people had this mentality of, if it's terrorism, then it has to be weapons, armored car. It's war, but people never thought of just a virus bringing the whole world to its knees. So it makes sense what you're saying.
Actually, it's called a Black Swan event. A Black Swan event is an event that comes to you and you would never have been prepared. It doesn't matter who you are. You wouldn't have prepared for a Black Swan event because it's an ambush. We were just ambushed by this thing and life changed instantly. And now think of it that there are people who have worked consistently on their personal development, and there are people who have not, because why work on something that is not broken? So people have been saying life works anyway until it didn't. And now you're finding people who have that backbone based on their personal development, and people who had no clue, and now they are caught up with this Black Swan. And I'm not quite certain that they have the capacity to now say, let's crash course. Because they are caught flat-footed. And this is where now you find people are now spiraling into a whole new place of mental health, depression, domestic violence, child molestation, and all these things are now starting to surge big time. So we have half the population that can actually sit down and continue to build themselves, not start. And we have another population that is now spiraling down. And we need first to stop their spiral before now they can start walking into the positives. So I'm looking at two dynamics and I'm wondering, where is our role in these two dynamics? How do you counsel a person you don't know exists? Or you can't even reach them? Yeah?
A great question. Now, that TD Jakes statement, I have a different view, not that I'm opposing what TD Jack said. Pandemics come with two distinct purposes. One is to just disrupt status quo. When people have been comfortable for a long time, nature has its own way of making you uncomfortable. And the second part, which is where really my point is that they come to push you to a new level. They come to like clean up, take you where you never thought possible. And by so doing, they also establish a new equilibrium. In 1346, I was saying, the Black Death pandemic swept across Europe like nothing had done before. And it was so deadly, it cleared about half of Europe's population then. It is estimated then the population of Europe was 600 million. So you can imagine a pandemic that came and cleaned out 300 million. That is quite deadly. We haven't even faced anything like that in any time in history. Yeah. So even this, with the global death estimates at what? Maybe?
Over a million.
1.6 million. We are nowhere close, and we may not even get there. But what I'm saying is, if you look at that pandemic, which lasted for 7 years, it ended in 1353. Several things happened. Because of such huge number of deaths, the labor force was seriously reduced. And a lot of the labor force in Europe then was in the form of serfdom. And serfdom is, for lack of a better word, like slavery. The people were almost not getting paid for what they were doing. But now that that was eliminated, the numbers were eliminated. The people who needed workers had to pay, and not only pay at a premium. That has never changed to date because people started knowing their value. If you go to Europe today, even getting a nanny is a problem. That's a situation in the first world. And that's something that began from a pandemic. Then the reduction of labor force also forced people to innovate. So that now some things that were being done manually had to be done through technology. So there's always a silver lining. That's my point. That even this, yes, some people have died, and God forbid, more will die. I pray for all of you to be there anyway. But the point is, these deaths are going to change how we do things. The way the medical profession works, that will change. The way companies work, that will change. You've already seen that, recent results are showing just basic hygiene of washing hands regularly. Yes, things we used to be taught in nursery school has made people more healthier because now we're not carrying a lot of. It will also have its own downside because when you remove all the microbes and you also compromise the immunity level. But things will change, and most likely for the better. We are facing a revolution which will take us to the next age. That's for sure.
And just to build on your point, we have two sets of thinking. One will say this is half full. Another will say it's half empty. It might be a controversial statement to make, but I like the shift that COVID-19 has brought. And I know, not being insensitive to the people who have lost their lives, to the people who have lost their livelihoods, but it's created a shift of mentality in that, and technology has a lot to do with all this. And I doubt if things will go back to the way they were before. And I also want us to be practical a bit. SK, you're an entrepreneur. You run companies. You've resumed operation, and I think you've been going on. Just to be practical to our viewers, what are some of the opportunities that COVID-19 has brought, and even adjustments that you've had to make?
Yeah. Just to follow on the perspective that was exhibited. They say the farther backwards we look, the farther forward we see. History repeats itself. And yes, such pandemics have been there. And just to take two instances and just combine them. In 1929 to 1930, when we had the Great Depression, and we take the 2000 collapse and we take the 2008 collapse, there are things that happened exact same way, and I think they're happening right now. So many people lost their jobs, and from that point of view, just like in the 1330s, what we saw was the birth of the gig economy. The gig economy is, I'll take 2008 as an example. When the economy crashed, pride has a way of fading out in a society. People are not shameful anymore. Just like in Kenya currently, no one is shameful to open their boot and sell fruits. It is what it is. And we're seeing cars selling fruits everywhere, because a pandemic has a way to just take off that coat of human, what do I call it?
It's more like ego and humble you.
Yeah. The ego takes a backseat, and we see the rise of a gig economy. And a gig economy basically brings us to a point that was stated earlier as well, that now it's personal value. People are exhibiting fruitfulness from a personal point of view, because a gig economy now, like in the US in 2008, all of a sudden people started doing deliveries. People started waking up in the morning, they drop their kids to school, then they do cab hailing. Then when it's time to pick their kids, they go pick them, they go home. Then I'm seeing as though that we will see even here, even more. Someone who has a washing machine now will say, I have a washing machine, why don't you bring your clothes? I'll wash for 200 shillings. And on and on and on. And people will start now having professionals who will go plugging into a place as a gigger. Yeah, a person who plugs in and paid for service pulls back, but not necessarily employed by the institution. So a gig economy always rises when people hit a crisis like this one. So for me, I'm seeing the rise of that. And what we are doing, as you mentioned, we are aligning ourselves to the gig economy. And we have been working for the last 1 year. We didn't know that COVID would come. So for the last 1 year, we had been working on a platform for cab hailing and deliveries. And it just happens that COVID came right on time. Met us prepared with this thing. And what we are doing is currently we are consciously aware that the hero of the day will be the guy who will create employment, especially in a time where so many people have lost their jobs. But the new employment that will be created in masses will be gig economy. So gig enterprises. So what we are seeing currently, we're seeing people who used to work regular jobs, and they're saying, you know what, I have 2 cars. I'm willing to give out 1 car for it to do cab hailing. Someone saying, I have some money, I'll buy Anduthi or 2 and put it in, find me a driver, find me a rider. And that's something that we will see for a long time going forward.
And Stephen, how do you, I know he's explained quite a bit on it, but to people who are scratching their heads on how to get on and resume operations, how do you align yourself, making sure that when the gig economy comes in, you'll be at the front line? How do you align yourself?
Awesome question. I want to revisit something I said earlier, that, you know, change comes when you become uncomfortable. And you've got to desire, you've got to want it so bad. That's a beginning point, because nobody is going to come to your house to tell you, hey, George, it's time. No, now it has to be an initiative from within. So how to align yourself? Number one, He's talking about the gig economy. The truth is the world moved online a long time ago. Yeah. And a lot of people have been sleeping on that idea. A lot of people have been resisting actually getting online. I personally do trainings on personal development, and I have 5 campuses: Kisumu, Mombasa, Nakuru, Nairobi, and Thika. And what I've been doing is to physically go to those places and also send my other trainers to those places. When COVID came, that had to stop. Now, let me tell you something very interesting. Earlier on, I had a lot of inquiries from Europe and America, people who had seen what I'm doing, and they're saying, we want to be part of this program. But I couldn't go there to train them, so the only way they could have been part of it is if I put it online. And I was part of this team I'm talking about, resisted getting online. Now COVID comes, forget the people who are in Europe, who are in America. I had to do it for the people who are here, because there were classes that were midway. So my point being this: digital economy is real. Digital economy is the way forward. And if you've not aligned yourself with digital knowledge, you have to do it. And not tomorrow. You actually have to do it yesterday. So we must embrace technology.
When I was doing, somebody somewhere is wondering, if I look at my product or if I look at my line of business, it's nowhere close to being under the digital economy. How do you move from that kind of mentality?
I was going somewhere else to tell you that when we talk about digital now, you also need to look at what is business really. Is business not just responding to needs? Whose needs? People's needs. So you need to look at what are the emerging needs and what are the needs that have always been there that now can be served with the emerging platforms. If the needs that you've been addressing are not in those 2 categories, then you need to reinvent yourself. And a great man always knows when it is time to change his mind. A great person always knows when it is time to shift gears. If you're going uphill, you can't use the same gear that you are using when you're on a flat surface or a slope downwards. You've got to engage gears that are relevant for what you're doing. So this is time to reinvent ourselves. And there are 2 ways to reinvent ourselves. We can just re-engineer how we do things. That is the easier part. But the more difficult part, which many people are called upon to do now, is to change what we do. And you did mention earlier, George, that people need to equip themselves with skill sets that are appropriate for a particular time. Yes. If you're only relying on one source of income, even before this, you are actually walking a very tight rope. You're sinking. So now, more than ever, we are required to learn other skills. Let me just interest you with something. As I sit here discussing all this, maybe you don't know, I'm an architect by profession. Yes, that's my training. And I did architecture for 23 years. But at some point I realized I was not fulfilled. I did not stop because it was a pandemic. Actually, I haven't stopped. I only do architecture now at a different level. But I had to acquire another skill. I had to find out what more I had inside me. And when I was doing my personal discovery journey or training, I realized that we have assets that we assume. For example, your voice. Your voice is an asset, and it can easily be turned into an invoice. But you've got to work on it. A simple thing like that. The other day I was telling people, ask yourself, since the lockdown, how many people have looked for you and paid you even before perhaps you've even done what they want you to do, simply because they know there's something so unique about you that they need. Yeah, because people have to need you. You've got to make yourself a need. So you've got to align yourself, what you do, how you do it, with what people are looking for. There's a person I know who was running a restaurant. After the lockdown, all restaurants were closed. This person decided this is hospitality industry. As George was saying, ego has to come down. How can I still be relevant in the hospitality industry in line with the restaurants? What do restaurants do? They serve food and drink, isn't it? So why can't I just take these things to people? Where I live is a gated community, and this person just decided to come outside there with the car. Luckily, she doesn't have as much competition as what I'm seeing along the Windsor roundabout. And all the people in the estate, forget even others. Just the gate of like an estate with over maybe 200 households, that's a big market. Some of those people had never entered her restaurant without competition. And you know, because it's a gated community and she's part of it, now everyone embraced her. She's telling me that she's doing better business than she was doing in what happened? Just a change of mind. Just bringing down your ego. I don't care who sees me do this from the cupboard. What I care about is I'm rendering a service that is needed and I'm getting the goods back in the form of money, right?
Yeah.
So everybody must ask, what are the needs that are existing and that existed? What are the emerging ones? How can you align yourself with them? Then go and sort out those needs. Business is always an exchange of, George needs this, I can offer it for this value. We agree, we exchange, done. Go your way, I go my way.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for very insightful remarks. And this is a point where I say the ball goes back to the court of the people watching, in that what are you going to do with all this wealth of information you've received on this platform? I do say, and as SK alluded to earlier on, it's all about adaptability, and we have to survive post-COVID-19. Thank you so much for watching.
This is Clean Money TV.